committee on 23rd of November 2021. For any who Rob James, my name is Rob James and I'm the chair of this committee. Just to make you aware that today's meeting will be recorded. I can't see any press or public in attendance, so I can skip this part. Can I please remind you all to switch off your phones or put them on silent for the duration of the meeting? In addition, can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings, which has been previously circulated? Namely, your microphone should be switched off or switched to mute, sorry, unless you're speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand via Teams? I will assume that you all read the paperwork before us today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak or wish to raise any technical issues with the officers. When asking the question, can you please indicate which page number you're referring to? And when speaking, please could you introduce yourself? Members who wish to speak in Welsh, please speak in Welsh first and then English afterwards, please. As you can see, the first item on the agenda is to do a roll call. Can I move on to Alison from DSU to walk us through it?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just go through members first. Councillor Darren Price.
Yes, present.
Councillor Giles Morgan.
Yes, present.
Councillor Saif Rahman.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Philip Downing.
Present.
Councillor Mike Evans.
Present.
Councillor Tony Barron.
Present.
And Councillor Jamie Adams.
Present.
Thank you. And I've had apologies from Councillors Alan Llewellyn, Sharon Freegard and Jan Curtis. So move on to officers now, Chair. Jonathan Burns.
Apologies, I was trying to find my mute button. Yes, present.
Thank you. Richard Arnold.
Present. Thanks, Alison.
Una Gavigan.
Present.
Lisa Willis.
Present.
Mike Shaw.
Yes, present, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you. And Simon Brennan.
Present.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the meeting whose name I haven't called?
Just mine, I think, Alison.
Sorry, Phil. Phil Ryder.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Chris Moore was due to attend, Alison, but he says he sends his apologies, and I will take the finance monitoring report on his behalf.
Thank you, Richard. And that's the roll call complete, Chair. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. So agenda item number 2 is Chair's announcements. I don't have any to make at the moment. So if we move on to 3, declarations of any personal interest, or has anyone got any personal interest to indicate? No. Then if we move on to item number 4, homes as power stations, can I welcome Ms. Gavigan and Miss, sorry, I can't see the name.
That'll be Lisa Willis.
Ms. Willis, to the meeting. And thank you for the notes prior to the meeting. I understand that you have a short presentation to make as well.
Yes, got a short presentation. I'll just call it up on the screen.
Diolch yn fawr.
Can you all see that?
Yes.
I can, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon and many thanks for the opportunity to present an update on the Homes as Power Stations project. For those I haven't already met, I'm Una Gavigan and I was appointed as the project manager at the beginning of this month. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the current status of the project, which was approved by the UK and Welsh governments in July of this year. As you know, this is one of the 9 City Deal projects. It's a regional project which is led by Neath Talbot Council. So the overall aim of the project is to facilitate the adoption of what has become known as the HAPS approach, which is ultimately the integration of energy efficient design and renewable technologies in over 10,000 new build and existing homes across the public, private and third sectors in the Swansea Bay City region. The project comprises of a number of key objectives. So the adoption of the HAPS concept, which is to prove the concept and then scale up to a much larger audience, to create smart and intelligent energy efficient homes, reduce carbon emissions, reduce fuel poverty, improve health and well-being, to create and support a skilled supply chain in the region, and sharing of information and data to enable this to happen. So to achieve these objectives, we have several funding streams available. So the first is the Financial Incentives Fund. So this is to the value of 5.75 million. And this will be used to add value to existing and pipeline new build and retrofit programmes by working initially with local authorities and registered social landlords to prove the concept and communicate outcomes to a wider audience to increase the demand and the uptake of the concept. Then we have a £7 million Regional Supply Chain Development Fund, and this will be used to develop a sustainable, skilled regional supply chain for renewable technologies in the homes. So the aim of this fund is to diversify the regional economy by supporting product development and to create a regional centre of excellence for renewable technologies. There's a need to develop a consistent approach and aggregate the supply chain in order to develop a skilled and sustainable regional supply chain. So working alongside the City Deal Skills and Talent programme will ensure that we have people with the necessary skills and qualifications to provide confidence. So the monitoring and evaluation of the programme. Many of the technologies are relatively new, and therefore the project will procure an independent organisation to evaluate the effectiveness of different designs and technologies to ensure ongoing learning and evaluation. The evaluation budget is set at £1 million and will therefore ensure a comprehensive and accurate set of data and results to inform the project as it progresses. Areas that will be included in the evaluation include lessons learned from technology performance, environmental conditions, fuel costs and fuel poverty, energy savings, behaviour and health and well-being improvements. So information will be shared on what we're calling an open access knowledge sharing hub, with input from the technical advisory group, which will be made up of multiple specialists in the fields so that all sectors will have access to the information. So I was specifically asked to cover the Pobl Harvard development in Neath as part of this update. So the Pobl scheme in Neath was one of the earliest pilot projects in the region, and it was funded by the Welsh Government Innovative Housing Programme and included a number of partners from Swansea University specific, industry and government to create 16 homes with the ability to generate, store and release solar energy. So HAPS funding hasn't actually been linked with this project. In the last few days, we have received some further information from Pobl, which I will also include. So the completion of the project, which is now called Clos Awawr, was delayed until November 2020, and that was largely due to COVID-19. Tenants moved into the homes between November 2020 and February of this year. So the company Zero have recently been appointed to continue monitoring and capturing data from the systems, measuring the effectiveness of the fabrics utilised and ongoing feedback from tenants. As one of the earliest developments in the region, we will look forward to further findings and lessons learned that can be shared via the Open Access Learning Knowledge Sharing Hub. So the project progress to date. So I was appointed and commenced the role at the beginning of this month. So I've started discussions with IT experts on how we're going to best share the lessons learned and the findings. So we're going to look at creating a hub of knowledge, which will be accessible to lots of different interested parties. I'm busy setting up meetings to get a map of the current initiatives where we can add value to programmes and highlight monitoring opportunities to prove the HAPS concept. Discussions have started to take place with the business development teams across each of the local authorities to map out and identify current supply chains across the region. We need to ensure that financial opportunities are made available via the Supply Chain Development Fund and the Financial Incentives Fund to existing and inward investment companies, which will be an important aspect as the project progresses. My next steps are to recruit the rest of the team. There's another 2 members of staff to be recruited early next year, and to establish and gain legal approval of the mechanisms to disseminate the funding streams. We'll commence procurement of the monitoring and evaluation also early next year. Finally, whilst the recent COP26 conference has brought attention to how we all live our lives, how this translates into construction methods and technology installation has got the ability to be extremely complex, complicated and challenging. There's lots of great work going on across the region and the UK, but at the moment it's a complicated and expensive landscape. I think one of the critical factors of HAPS is to simplify what it means and clearly communicate the effectiveness, the benefits, and to push the demand up and the cost down. Longer term, it needs to be a concept that homeowners like you and I will need to understand and buy into. So whether it's the technology, the science, the skills to install, the maintenance qualifications, the health or financial benefits, it will all need to work hand in hand to be successful. So I look forward to providing a further, more in-depth update in the new year, but I'm very happy to have Simon Brennan, Head of Property and Regen, and Lisa Willis, Strategic Funding Manager, with me today. Both were integral in compiling the business plan and will be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. I know there's a few members that wish to speak on this matter. Just for clarity, you've identified £13.75 million worth of funding streams at the moment. Can I assume that that is city deal investment? So 13.75 of the 15 million has been allocated to that. I see Richard nodding, so that's accurate, yes. So in terms of the 114 million and the 375 million, both public and then private investment, are you able at this stage just to indicate where we're at with that? Has there been any public investment? Has there been any private investment? And has there been any indication from the private sector regarding potential investment?
Do you want me to take that one, Liz?
Yeah, thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Simon Brennan, Neath, Talbot.
Thank you.
Obviously, that will become from the private sector investment of the development of the new homes over the period of the programme. In terms of the public sector money as well, for the RSLs, the registered social landlords, that will be a mixture of private and public, because they use private financing as well as public financing to deliver their projects. In terms of interest, obviously, from the public sector, there's significant interest already, as you would expect, with everybody on their journeys to carbon zero. And also from the private sector, particularly amongst the small to medium enterprises, it's always more difficult to get the volume house builders involved in these kinds of projects, because they tend to be quite accountancy driven until such time as the technologies have been proven and really, in truth, that the costs are starting to driven down and the technology is more readily available. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. As Una said, we're at the very start of the journey. And it's now that we've got staff coming into place, we can start to increase some speed.
Thank you for that. I'll start bringing in some of the members and then come back. Councillor Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I disappeared for a couple of seconds there, so I missed the beginning of Simon's presentation. My first question was how long have the people been living there, but Una answered that with the first paragraph. How far away are we from collecting the final data on this? Because I visited this site just before anybody moved in, and I got to be honest, I was very excited with what I've seen. And of course, the data from this will bring what I look like private developers on board with HAPS, because we've spoken about before that the difference in cost of an ordinary house and a house's power stations. So that's got to be taken into account. And the other thing is, have we collected any data on retrofitting? Because I know Swansea Council have done some retrofitting, but it's the data after is what we're actually interested in, so that we can. I know it's reducing the carbon footprint, but also we got to shout from the rooftops that it is working. I know it's not a question Una can answer because she's only been there for a couple of weeks, but do we envisage how many new jobs would be created from this, and how many, more importantly, apprentices? Because like I said, this is a new concept, and we need new apprentices to pick up everything that goes in these houses. And I've been on the website, and yes, it is a good virtual tour. It's exactly what I've seen on site, as it says on the tin. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Devlin.
If I answer some of the questions there, I think at least I can pick me up on some detail if I miss anything out. Yeah. In terms of the monitoring and evaluation, you're absolutely right. That's a key part of the whole project, and something that we're very keen to ensure we get a standardised monitoring and evaluation process, so that we are comparing like with like across the South West Wales region, so that we understand the data better. And there's a couple of different types of monitoring. Obviously, there's monitoring in terms of the cost of use and the carbon, but also particularly what we're interested in is the softer side of it and the impact on people's lives and the impact on other services within the public sector, particularly around health, etc. So it would be a sort of wide-ranging monitoring evaluation process that we're interested in. Obviously, in terms of that development there, up in the former Harvard site in Neath, they've started doing the monitoring now. They will monitor across the various seasons, obviously, because you need to see how it performs during different weather conditions. And they're also, as they go, they're also fine-tuning it. So they will continue to monitor, because it'll be almost be like a continuous loop, really, of monitoring and fine-tuning of the kit that's installed there. But what we can do in the not too distant future, hopefully, is perhaps get one of the employees from Pobl to come along and perhaps talk us through the monitoring that they've had to date.
Thank you very much for that. Can I bring in Councillor Adams, then Councillor Jones?
Thanks very much, Chair. And as just following on perhaps from Philip, I think one of the great opportunities with this element of City Deal is the opportunity to gain knowledge and intellectual property and create jobs. And I think one of the things I'd be keen to ensure is that there's a sustainable legacy to this project, and that can only be created, as you've alluded to, Simon, through good data collection and effectively proving the pudding. But there's no doubt that people who live in better insulated homes can be lifted out of poverty. Their health improves. And ultimately, the way we lift people out of poverty is really by giving them meaningful jobs that are sustainable into the future. One of the things I wanted to ask on the knowledge transfer and looking at intellectual property is there an opportunity for any value to be attached to that for the region? And therefore any income to be derived from it, because this is the it's the South West Wales city deal, Swansea and South West Wales. We're here to challenge city deal to improve the economic situation in our region, and every opportunity we have to do that I think should be taken. Whilst knowledge transfer is important in terms of perhaps sharing some of this, but I'd be quite keen to see some income attached to that as well, and I'd just be interested in your thoughts on that and whether there's an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Yep, and also, sorry, I was remiss of me, I didn't answer Councillor Downing's second parts of his questions, which I think integrate into this one, to be honest, which is the supply chain development is a key strand of what we want to do here. And we're sort of targeting 3 key areas, which I usually forget one of, but it's the intelligent energy system, which is the kind of black box, almost the brains behind the system that allows you to share energy across. And there's some really good work being done in South Wales with a couple of companies around that. And then also around potentially around heat pumps and also battery storage. And we've been working with Industry Wales, who are very knowledgeable on both supply chains and industrial developments generally, to look at targeting some of those industries to try and get those kind of industries to set up within South West Wales. We're very keen that we work together as a region, because I think that's the key part here. This is not about one particular local authority gaining an advantage. It's about spreading the amount of potential out there across the region, and not ending up with sort of 4 of us trying to develop heat pump manufacturers and nobody looking at intelligent energy systems or battery storage. So it's about making sure it works as a region, and within the regeneration group that we have, economic development and regeneration group across the South West Wales region that I chair, we've got a really good working relationship with each of the authorities, and so we're very keen to build on that and make sure that it develops a good supply chain across the region, because you're absolutely right, that's where the economic benefit will come from. And up to date, a great deal of the kit has been imported. So, I mean, onshoring of those types of activities, bringing them into the UK, and particularly for us, obviously selfishly within the South West Wales region, is seen as a key point, really, as a big part of the strategy. And the other point that I think Councillor Downing made was around skills and training and apprenticeships. We're very mindful at this stage that we don't have the necessary skills within our region or even within the UK to develop this at the pace that it'll need to be developed at. You can already see as the jobs go out at the moment, it's very difficult to recruit, especially within the public sector, and the wage restrictions that we've got, because the private sector are obviously paying significantly more. So we need to start developing rapidly, and we're working with the colleges and the universities to make sure we can bridge that skills gap. And also, obviously, skills and training is another one of our city deal projects or programs. So this is about working across the board, I think, and working with the various different strands to make sure we can do that. And in terms of integration, obviously, you've got things like the city deal IT infrastructure program as well, because each of these homes, when you start to have intelligent energy systems, need to have good IT connections as well for both the monitoring and to make sure we can power share. So it has to be done in conjunction with all of the other strands and across the whole of the region, I think, to make sure this is as effective as possible.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones.
Yes, you've answered one of the questions I was going to actually ask with regards to at the present time there are different parts of the region actually going out and developing things on themselves, by themselves and so on. So hopefully we can, well, you can actually, shall we say, put a stop to that and everybody actually move forward, you know, in the same direction. Again, with standardization on the supply chain and so on, it's pointless people having different supply chains at the end of the day. But with regards to, you know, the jobs, I know there's quite a lot of jobs actually put forward to be created actually with this. But is that estimate of jobs solely for this development? Because, you know, if you build 10,000 houses, the building trade, we're going to build 10,000 houses anyway. So I think we must be careful really with regards to how many jobs are going to be attributed to this. Have we actually looked at that? Again, I know it's actually been touched with regards to the funding element and so on. Again, if you actually got a standardized project, is that actually going to be a deterrent to the private and possibly the public sector as well? I don't know if you comment on some of those points.
In terms of the jobs, we're keen to develop a job. I mean, you're absolutely right. The jobs in the construction sector, by and large, if you're going to develop that many homes, would have been there anyway, albeit that there's some changes within the construction sector about modern methods of construction. So you've got some off-site construction starting to happen, and that might help with the insulation side of it, and also deal with some of the skills deficit we've got in some of the construction trades. But the big part of the jobs is in the development of the supply chain, is really developing those companies, either from starter companies or through inward investment. But I mean, what we've found so far, and I think the pandemic, unfortunately, was one of the few things that was any good to come out of the pandemic, is we've seen a number of our companies across the region start to diversify into other areas and to start looking at other opportunities. So I think that's part of our process as well, is to look at the existing companies and see where they could integrate into that supply chain. They may not produce the end heat pump, but they may be supplying electronics, or they may be supplying a certain part of the componentry that will help that product develop further. In terms of standardization, I mean, we've never really had a great deal of standardization within the housing sector, because obviously each site is slightly different, albeit that the volume house builders tend to deliver the same sorts of products across the board. And they're the ones that really we need to get integrated into this, so that because once they've developed a set of technologies that can exist within their standardized housing products, be it 6, 7, 8 different houses that they do, that would make life an awful lot easier for them. Because when you're continually developing these things from scratch, you end up with an awful lot of consultants fees and design fees in there that obviously pushes the prices up significantly. So there is an element of standardization as much as you possibly can. And for those products where, as I mentioned earlier, with the new methods of construction, where they're constructing them in factories and then taking them out to the site, that might be slightly easier, because you can integrate the technologies into the standard bits of kit coming out of the factory.
Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chair. We're obviously aware that the project manager has only recently taken up her post, so it's still early days, but would she give a commitment to providing us with timelines and milestones so that this scrutiny committee can actually check on progress, see that things are going in the right direction at the right speed? And would she also please provide us with a risk analysis of where there is likely to be problems and what mitigations can be taken to overcome those risks? Thank you.
Yep, that's fine, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. A risk analysis has already been completed as part of the business plan. So obviously we will be updating that as the project progresses. And I have been scheduled, I believe, to come back to Joint Scrutiny Committee in April next year. So I'll be able to provide further detail and more in-depth information at that meeting.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So some of the questions I had was on as has been stated, some of these companies have to pretty much be created from scratch. And as Councillor Adams has already indicated, intellectual property is sometimes a valuable asset to have in the region. Has any consideration been given to arms length companies in this respect in some of the supply chain matters?
Not particularly, I have to say. I think there's potential here for the universities with the spin-offs that come out of the universities, and we've had a few of those within the region to look at these sorts of technologies. And I think, generally speaking, it's not something that we would look to do as an arm's length company, I think, because it will end up being a very competitive market at some point, because the demand for these products over the next 5 years, I think, will grow exponentially. I think we're at the very start of it at the moment, and I think people are still wary of technologies and arguably getting it wrong. And we're very keen, and part of the lessons learned bit is that even when it goes wrong, is to get those lessons out there, because there's no doubt that there are going to be an awful lot of mistakes and wasted money to a certain extent over the next 5 years with some of these projects. But it will be about the lessons learned. It's about making sure we don't do that twice. So it's about spreading that knowledge, and crucially, not retaining it within the registered social landlord sector or the local authority sector, but spreading it out to the private sector as well, because that's the only way we're going to grow this at the speed that we need to.
Yeah, okay. And then in terms of, as has been indicated, we're still at the very early stages of our development of our plans and our strategy regarding delivering what is the largest element of the Swansea Bay City deal. Do you believe there's any scope for pre-decision scrutiny to happen with regards to you bringing plans to this committee on ideas that you may have, and that we be able to provide recommendations or suggestions in how we believe they could be improved or strengthened?
Yeah, we're happy to work with the committee. If you just give us an indication of what you would like and when and what we can give you. We can either do it through the various reports that we'll be giving, and we can scrutinise at that point. But if there's anything particular you want from us, we'd be more than happy to oblige.
There we are. We'll be in discussions then with that. That's fantastic. Does any members have anything else to raise at this stage?
Yes, sorry, Chair, I haven't got time to get my hand up. This is shall we say, a 15-year project, and so many years have actually gone by. Are we confident that we will reach this, shall we say, target figure within 15 years? Have we got some sort of flavour at the present time with regards to progress?
I think we can be as confident as we can be at this stage at the start of any project. And obviously, as you say, there's large numbers attached to this one, more so than the others, perhaps. And some of it will, as a matter of course, will happen through the construction process. But it's about attaching the technologies to that construction process to make sure that we've delivered our outputs, really. I think we can just be confident at this stage that we can do it. There's nothing to suggest that we can't. So we shall work as hard as possible to deliver.
Okay, that's great. Thank you all for attending. You're welcome to stay in the meeting if you wish, or feel free to leave for other commitments.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks.
So if we can move on to agenda item number 5, this is the Financial Monitoring Report, Q1. Can I bring in Richard Arnold, please?
Thanks very much, Chair. So this is the quarterly monitoring financial report for Q1. I would have liked to have been in the position to bring Q2, but the last joint committee was cancelled, and therefore what I will do is bring Q2 to the next joint scrutiny committee. It should be ready by then. So just before I go into the detail of the report, just to outline the position, the financial structure, so it makes sense as I get into the depth and the body of the report. The way in which we account for the city deal is we've got the joint committee, which is made up of all the support functions and the committee itself, including the scrutiny and the portfolio management office. And then we have the portfolio investment fund, which you'll see abbreviated to PIF, which essentially is the £250 million grant that will be drawn down over the next 15 years. So there's a category split between the two of them, which what we base the accounts on, the accounting structure, and indeed the financial statements, because we have to do a year-end financial statements on the city deal independently of the host authority of Carmarthen, and they have to be independently audited as well. So to move into the report itself, the Joint Committee report, there's an Appendix A attached to it, which is an Excel spreadsheet based on the forecast out-turn position for the year. So then there was an agreed budget that was put through to Joint Committee last year, and that was a 5-year agreed operational budget. We're currently in year 2 of that agreed budget. However, where it gets a bit confusing, we're actually in year 4 of the city deal, because the city deal existed or the Joint Committee existed in shadow form to a point, and then there was a 6-month translation period into the formal accounting structure and mechanisms to deal with it. So we're currently anticipating a year-end out-turn position of 181,000. So this is made up of democratic services and legal services from Swansea, some legal advisory fees, internal audit and support. Internal audit is currently in the process of scoping and mapping out their current year audit, but that will be undertaken by the year end and completed by the year end. There's external audit fields, which is fees for, as I explained, for Wales Audit, for the work that they do, carrying out assurance and review work on the financial statements, which they won't undertake till, well, it won't be until the beginning of June legally, because there's legal regulations around that. And the recharge for the statutory Section 151 officer as well. Then the Joint Scrutiny Committee, we're anticipating an outturn of £29,000 by year end to facilitate your committee here. That has been reviewed and will be adjusted in Q3 in line with remote working and stuff. There was some savings involved in that due to the current way of working. Moving on to the Portfolio Management Office. The Portfolio Management Office is demonstrating a year-end spend of 644,000. So that is under budget, primarily due to it's not been fully operational due to the ongoing pandemic, and things will pick up in the next financial year. There is savings on staffing. That's predominantly because we had a communications officer leave earlier on in the year, and there was a few weeks, the odd month vacancy there, as well as the way in which we've budgeted for the city deal to be prudent is we've budgeted it at top of the grade. So there is some savings there. So it's alludes to about the 74,000 saving. And then there's some further costs down in the respect of office rental at the Beacon, some fees, including the gateway fees that we have to undertake annually by the Integrated Assurance Hub, and some conferences and marketing and advertising. That particular line has been revised, so it will be a bit less because the events that was hopeful that would have been done in Q1, because the country hasn't sort of got back up and running as quick as we thought back then. There will be savings on that line. There is an unwinding. I have to put a provision in because of the way in which the committee and the city deal are set up. I've got to put a provision in for unwinding. So there's a £60,000 revision for unwinding. And then we're moving on to the funding contributions, which is made up of two particular elements. It's the grant revenue contribution, which is the 1.5% top slice of the grants. And then the 8 partner contributions of 50,000 per partner. And that results in a deficit position of 91,000, 92,000 rounded up. The reason that there's a deficit position there, and it's actually nothing to worry about, is to do with a timing effect, because the revenue contributions of 422 is based on the drawdown of grant, and because some of the projects have been delayed in having the business case approved, it meant there's less money being paid out than initially we would have hoped, and as such, it's had a knock-on effect. But what you'll see it catching up in next year, the year after, and the year after that, when nearly all the project, well, I imagine all the projects will be approved, because campuses is the only one in at the moment, and that's the final one. And we're in full development mode on all 9 projects, and the minute we're in that, the money will be dispersed in quite a sizable format. So from the deficit position, we've actually got a reserve because it existed in shadow form, because it existed in shadow form, it built up a reserve of about 272,000. So the last 2 years, because we're in deficit position on the Joint Committee due to a timing effect, we've supported it from a reserve. So we will have a reserve figure anticipated about 123,000, which it sits in a specialised ring-fenced reserve for the city deal to be utilised in future years. So it's not a loss, it's not going to be absorbed anywhere, it's just going to be rolled forward and utilised it will be in years 4 and 5, to be honest with you, because I think we're anticipating a break even next year based on the budget. So that's the Joint Committee. Moving on, so then we've got the Portfolio Investment Fund, or the PIF. So what the PIF is an outturn position based on 15 years. So we've got a high level investment composition there, matched against the original heads of terms. What I'm currently working on at the moment, because the original heads of terms was signed back in 2017, because campuses is the only one and will be approved by the year end, it means we'll have a formal revision of the budget in which we can assess the investment against, because all the business cases have now come to fruition. So against the original heads of terms, we're demonstrating a deficit on investment of about 37 million, which is about 3%, which is very good considering what's gone on in the last 4 to 5 years, last 2 in particular. So what we're saying is that the investment package that is expected to be delivered by the Swansea Bay City deal at year 15 is 1.237 billion against the 1.274 originally anticipated when the heads of terms were signed. I was asked by yourselves to provide some detail at project level. So the program investment level forecast table it's the same high level information, but it's just at project level, so you can see how it's made up and where the variances have occurred. So that's project level information, and those tend to be covered. Those are updated quarterly as well, in order to align to the financial monitoring. The Swansea Bay, it's been recognised within the Swansea Bay. One of the challenges that we have financially in the city deal, and we knew this when we signed up to it back in 2017, is that the £241 million grant is a capital only grant. But in order to deliver some of these projects, there is a pull on revenue. So at the moment, we've been monitoring this because the Section 151s have to manage this quite carefully, how they translate capital into revenue, or how they support the revenue requirement of some of the projects. So we're anticipating the revenue out of that 1.237 billion I just referred to, 55 million of it is revenue. So it equates to about 4%. So there is some management involved in it. This was down from Q4, which we were anticipating a 76 million requirement, revenue requirement, but it's just because there's been some more detailed analysis done on Swansea campuses there when they were developing the business case and sending the business case into the government. So that's the the high-level financial position on the Swansea Bay City deal. I'm happy to go, if anybody wants any clarity on anything or got any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Okay, thank you for that, Richard. In terms of the PIF, as you say, love an acronym. obviously this is still high level. What would be useful to myself and maybe the rest of the committee is that if we break it down into like year one expectations for how much we were going to spend in terms of public and private, how much drawdown we were going to expect, and then say for year 2 and year 3 to see if we actually are we drawn down as much as we thought we were going to. Are we investing through the councils and the universities as much as we anticipated? And then how much private investment is actually coming through the doors each year? Because I think at the moment, I personally am in the dark a little bit on that. How much has private companies actually invested into this part of year 2, and how much has the councils put in through their borrowing powers to date? It's still a bit muddled. So with the next report that you're bringing, could you have a look at that first as well, please?
I can certainly have a look at that. Some of the work that's ongoing and why we haven't been able to provide it is because all the business cases aren't in. We couldn't get a high level, accurate portfolio analysis done of it. Because campuses is in, and that's the final one, I'm in the process of revising budget and looking at the revised profiles to enable the next report that will be going to the Joint Committee, and which I will bring here, will manage expectation versus what they expected, which was included within the approved business cases. So absolutely, I can do that, and it will be included it won't be in your next report, which is Q2, but it certainly will be in Q3 when the information is all but approved by then.
Right, because obviously you're basing it on, for example, digital infrastructure, where we haven't spent a lot at the moment. We're still developing strategies. We're still working on our plans. Things like Regan, it's up. Things like, the Swansea arena, that's almost complete. There are things that are already going on. We're seeing money going into these things, but I think from the committee sense is that we don't know what's private, what's public, and it would help to have a bit more understanding in where the money's actually being spent right now. Where's that coming from?
Okay, I can go down into that level of detail. I can certainly go down to that level of detail to expand more on the investment components rather than the higher level view. And
it would also help in terms of target setting and how are we reaching our targets, because obviously one of the big ones, Holmes's Power Station, perfect example, £300 million worth of private investment we anticipating for that. We need to, as a committee, be on top of you saying, right, you thought you're going to get 50 million through this year. Have you reached that? If not, why not? And is there anything that can be done to make sure that we reach it next time? That kind of information I think would be helpful. Okay, so we got Phil and then John.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I was just going to add to what Rich has said, and the benefits realisation profiles, which will also come in the next quarter. They're going to Joint Committee at the next Joint Committee that's available. They split down the anticipated benefits at a portfolio level currently for the 15 years to 2033. They don't quite go down to the granularity that you've just asked for at this point in time, but they do give us GVA jobs and investment anticipated up until the end of the portfolio. And from there on out, they will also give us the wider programme and project benefits that are being delivered. So things like floor space, or you use the digital infrastructure example, the physical amount of cable that's being laid, etc., etc. So they will come across in the next couple of reports. In relation to what we've done to date, because essentially it's not, as Rich said, because there was a bit of a false start on delivery, we're almost baselining at this financial year, because we've only really, with the exception of Egg in phase 1 and the arena, we've only really started delivery in 2021-22. So that's kind of our initial baseline, if you like, and everything is moving forward from there. And what I've also said to the respective governments from the start of the new financial year is that we'll report on an annual basis, quarter by quarter as well. So we won't just have the funding year split. We'll have it quarter by quarter for that year, but that won't commence until the start of the financial year, purely because, as I said, we're baselining this year.
Okay. John, do you want to come in?
Pretty much Phil has covered it, Chair, but it is just to give Scrutiny that kind of reassurance, to summarise what both Rich and Phil have indicated. You will have richer information going forward in the next few quarters, which then you can scrutinise on a quarterly basis. But we'll also do annual reports and various things like that as well throughout the process. So yeah.
Okay, that's great. And then I guess on the drawdowns, as you say, we're in year 4 of the 15, but year 2 for financing. I'm guessing that because 8 of the 9 are through the door, should we say, we've drawn down more than 2 years currently?
The way the drawdown has worked, and where it's just slightly out of sync, is 2018-19 is considered year 1 of the city deal, even though I think the joint committee and the city deal was formalised latter that year, or I think it might have been in the following year. So what we've had to date is we've had our first 3 years worth of drawdown, and we've actually paid money, dispersed that grant out to, at the moment, one of the projects, and within the next 2 weeks it'll probably be there'll be another 3-4 claims being paid out. So it's only now we're 6 months into this financial year that the projects have been approved, the funding agreements have been signed, and I'm now starting within the next 2 weeks to release. I think I've got another 4 million going out, and these chunks will be going out in significant forms going forward over the next 18 months, where the backlog of cash is sort of stacked up because of the delay in development of business cases and approval of business cases.
Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate what you said in terms of getting richer information, and thanks to Jonathan and Richard for providing that. But just to reiterate to the committee, if you look at city deals all around the world, the biggest criticism is that, you know, there's no measurement of how they achieve what they say they're going to achieve. And I think it's just worth restating that publicly, just by me saying this, in that, you know, we need the information. We don't want to make the same mistakes as other city region deals. So, you know, there's only so much, you know, I'm going to sort of put up with being told, you know, in the early days, you know, it's over 20 years, in the GVA and everything that's put into these reports, you know, it comes from somewhere, you know, but they put into the report, and we have to accept that it's going to be, it was originally 1.2 billion GVA, now it's up to 1.9, nearly 2 billion. There's more jobs and what have you. So, you know, I'll certainly be looking forward to getting the meat on the bones so that we can see, you know, if these projects are delivering. So I'm just sort of restating what you said there, Chair, but I think it's a point well made.
Appreciate that, Councillor Morgan. Jonathan?
It's just building on Councillor Morgan's kind of, I know we've discussed this quite a few times in Scrutiny, but the jobs created and inward investment are quite tangible, and they're attributable to a project. What we're in discussions with the UK and Welsh Government is around GVA. Even though that is our primary indicator, it's a macroeconomic indicator, and how you attribute that to a project to then build it up to the wider regional setting. We're seeking clarity, and so are many other city and growth deals across the UK, and how that would be presented to governments and to yourselves. So that is still, we are aiming to measure it, we're aiming to monitor it. It may not be on a quarterly basis due to the nature of the indicator, but it will factor in as it stands. But we are seeking clarity. But as Phil said, there's many other indicators as well at a project and programme level, which aren't the headline indicators, but there's very good things that will happen locally with those projects and across the region, as we just heard with HAPS as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. And for me personally, I'm looking at the jobs number, and are they new jobs? Are they repurposed jobs? Are they jobs that have moved from Cardiff down to this region? What are them jobs? These are the kind of figures I'm looking at, because obviously I'm interested in local job opportunities for my residents. So you said you've got 3 years drawdown. What is that total figure currently, Rich?
So the balance of the total figure was 18 million for 3 years. The UK government announced, I think back in February of this year, that they were front loading their aspect of the grant from 15 to 10 years. So we're anticipating the new drawdown figure, although this is not confirmed because we haven't had any conditions forwarded to us yet, at about 23 million.
Okay, that's helpful.
Now, at the moment, we're anticipating, I think it's between 12 and 16 million to be spent this financial year, or dispersed, I should say, this financial year, which would increase our reserve. But what we've increasingly reiterated to governments is this is not us being front loaded and banking cash for the sake of it. What it is because there's been a slight delay in approval and development of business cases, we need that cash, because the minute that these projects start signing their funding agreements and start moving forward next year, they are just going to draw down their backlogged cash from year one in large lump sums, and we're expecting some of these projects are expected to be borrowing by November next year.
Okay.
So it's important that we do get the drawdown, because if they didn't agree to it, for example, it's going to cost the authorities money, not this year, but next year, because it meant that the money that they were expecting isn't going to be able to be released, and they'd have to borrow more than they were expecting above that. So you've got to be when we've had discussions with government, you can't look at it as this is this annual position this year. You've got to look at it over the next 5 to 8 year delivery period, because over the next 18 months to 5 years, projects will be entering, will need to borrow in order to support the delivery of the project, because of the drawdown with 15 years, you see.
So your office has done a bit of an analysis on capital requirement for the next year on all projects, so you have an indication.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Could you also include that in the next report as well? So
I can include the cash flow in there, no problem at all.
That's great, thanks. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I agree with the chair. You know, I'm really interested in the jobs output, actually, you know, from this scheme at the end of the day. And it's important what Giles actually said, you know, with regards to other city deals. But, you know, Richard, you know, just to clarify, you know, we're actually talking about front loading, you know, 10 years and so on. So even though some of the projects will actually be completed within, you know, hopefully 5 years, they are still deemed to actually only draw down over 15 years. And when you talk about borrowing, a lot of these authorities are actually borrowing for 40 years anyway.
Right, and what I'm referring to is the temporary funding gap created through timing effect of the drawdown. So because the drawdown, because the UK government are paying over 10 years and Welsh government at present are paying over 15 years, yet these projects will all be delivered in the next 5 to 7, 8 years, say. They would have spent their full grant allocation in the next 5 to 7 years, but they won't be getting the money to support that until probably 6 to 7 years after that. So that funding gap is what the authorities have got to borrow or support on a temporary basis over 15. Now, you might well be right. They might decide they're taking a full borrowing maturity loan out over 40 years, and they've incorporated this temporary gap into it because they know that by taking it over 40 years, there's no pull on their capital program or other projects they got until 8 years down the line, and that's how they're managing it. But each authority will manage it very differently, very independently, but all authorities have got the same issue. There's a gap created because the money's not coming down until not matching the delivery spend, essentially.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And finally, the question I have is, has the JC agreed on how to utilise the interest that we get in on this currently, probably to offset the borrowing costs later down the line?
The JC approved the interest apportionment last financial year, and they deemed it fair and equitable to distribute it back to projects based on the grant allocation. So in the last 2 years, the grant that hasn't been dispersed has demonstrated about £66,000 worth of interest accrued on those investments, and the 66,000 has been. We've got one going through this week, and it will be the final one being dispersed back to the authorities based on their projects.
Okay, that's great. Does anyone have any other questions they want to raise with Richard before we move on to the next item? I can't see any. Thank you very much, Rich. Really appreciate that. Look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Agenda item number 6. So this is the Swansea Bay City Deal internal audit review. Members have had some paperwork prior to the meeting. I also understand that John Phone wants to speak on this matter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So you've received this paper previously, but I'll give you an update on the 4 key recommendations. Just as a summary, 2 are closed, 1 is near completion, and the other will be ongoing within this period, but it will also be ongoing within the next audit period as well. So I'll cover off those things, and if anybody wants to stop me en route or ask me any questions at the end, please do. So the first recommendation, Chair, was around formal agreements. These are the 4 partners, so the 2 health boards, 2 local authority, 2 health boards, 2 universities. They're not signed partners on the joint committee agreement, but they are partners to the city deal. Agreements have been sent to all of those 4 bodies. We've had 3 responses, and we're hopefully receiving the 4th one this week. So Rich and Chris Moore will receive that this week from Howell Var. So we're virtually complete on that. In terms of the declarations of interest, a process is now in place. We have until the end of November, I believe, Rich, to get all the responses. We got 93% response rate to date. The only exception is the Economic Strategy Board. What we've been doing is working with a monitoring officer to look for the how fit for purpose the template is for our ESB board members, as opposed to an officer-driven type template. And we'll hopefully get a response from Tracy within the next week to finalise the template, transfer anything across if we need a new one, and get ESB board members to review and sign those off within the next few weeks. So that's the plan with that. So we're making good progress. And then the third element of the first recommendation is the anti-fraud, anti-corruption strategy. That has now been completed, approved, and the recommendation is complete. So that's the first recommendation. So without a couple of little final touches, that is almost there. In terms of risk scoring methodology, that was to be asked to be reviewed and identify inherent and residual risk scores. That has been complete. So that's closed, and that's been confirmed by Pembrokeshire Council. The third recommendation was around the capture and reporting achievement of outputs, outcomes and impacts, the hot topic of debate, as we all are having now that we're in delivery. This is what everybody wants to see, including us as a PMO. So what Phil has been working a lot with the project leads on this. Effectively, the business cases that go forward for approval, regional and governments, they detail all of their stuff around benefits realisation. But what we are trying to do now is break it down into annualised or quarterly numbers, so that then we can monitor against the actuals against the planned, which is what you're getting at in terms of what you want to see. So as Phil kind of indicated earlier on, jobs created, GVA, particularly in investment as a whole, but private sector investment as a subcategory will be part of that, and that is against the portfolio. What we'll also do then is we'll annualise targets baseline against this year, and then we'll also look at cascading those out into projects and programmes for the wider benefits that they have in their business cases, and make sure again those are recorded and monitored through their governance and escalated up to portfolio level on certain indicators. We're adopting a kind of 80-20 rule. 80% of the key things that we will measure will be reported, but there'll be other things that will stay more locally within the local governance. So the plan is to get the detailed benefits monitoring done for the next quarter, so that will be quarter 3. By Q4, we'll have the outturn of the year, so then we can measure against that and see, did we achieve what we set out to do? And then ongoing from that point, which is at the next financial year, we will have a fully fledged operating benefits realisation plan and the monitoring process. I'll pause there just in case Phil wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, I mean, again, John said it there that, you know, the benefits is key to what we're trying to do. Without delivery of the benefits, then as has been said earlier, then there's a potential for the portfolio to fail. You know, just as a kind of an example, we've mentioned that Eregin and the arena are very well progressed. Eregin phase 1. I mean, the arena is slightly different because it's still in delivery, and it's a slightly different categorization of benefits. But Eregin, for example, we've been in conversations with University of Wales, Trinity St David, and we've got the figures and the investment figures and the jobs figures that they have created so far. You know, just to kind of give you that overview of that, the anticipated jobs for S4C was 55. They've created 60. The anticipated jobs on site after phase 1 was 148, and their current position is just short of 90. The companies they anticipate being on site is 20, and they've currently got 16 contracted tenants, with 13 of those being new startups and business incubated. So we are starting to collate this information, but as John said, come the next quarter, we will, as long as it's gone through joint committee by this point, we will have a breakdown of these across the next or the remainder of the portfolio, and from the next financial year, we look to report those in a further level of granularity again.
Thanks, Phil. Just for a slight correction there, Phil, of which startups business incubated, I think the number was 6 from recollection, just in case it's minuted. But no, it's 13. That's the actual. 6 was the target. Oh, 6 was the target. 13 is the actual. Yeah, brilliant. They're overachieving by significantly. But Chair, I guess that this is one of the actions, I think, from a previous meeting, and one of the councillors asked for an update on it. That's a verbal update. We will make sure that's part of the monitoring process that you will get on the quarterly forms that we submit. Thanks for that, Phil. The last one, Chair, is around private sector funding. Again, a red risk on our register. And what the recommendation asked for was that we monitor it. I think the words were carefully monitor it to make sure that we remain on track. And then around contingency planning, particularly around if the private sector funding does not materialise. So the kind of stance from the city deal and all the partners is that there's no contingency plans per se for the £600 million plus of private sector investment. But what we have in place is that each local authority lead and each lead deliverer is responsible for the outcomes, outputs and impacts, of which that £600 million of private sector funding is part of that, which is the inward investment. So we, as I said, we've got it on our red risk on our portfolio risk register. It's cascaded down to projects and programs. There's lots of mitigations in place for that, including, as Rich indicated, quarterly financial monitoring. We've created a framework for business engagement and commercial activity. We're waiting for that to be approved following a different regional consultation based on economic development. And once that's gone through the 4 local authorities, we then have a green light to implement our framework, supporting that wider regional plan. But there's also other mitigations that we're doing. So we want to do as much business engagement going forward. Homes as Power Station is a case in point that you heard today. There are funds available to engage with the private sector, whether it's supply chains or housing developers or whatever it might be, to make sure that we get some traction based on that. And we are recruiting people now to start engaging with businesses and having various business networks and forums and governance groups, etc., set up. And we can keep on saying it, skills, jobs created is one of the most important things. Now that RLSP are overseeing skills, and we will have a report on that soon coming to scrutiny, we can start embedding and joining things up a bit more than what we probably could have previously, because there's funds, there's mechanisms, there's people in place to take these things forward. So as Rich said, in relation to this, payments are now in line with the JCA and funding agreements, and money is starting now to flow to local authorities, and that will continue to do so as projects on board and start delivering. So Chair, those are the 4 recommendations. We've made good progress. The last one, incidentally, is closed in effect because we've put things in place. So yeah, we're almost there to complete all of those 4 recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. The 2 questions I have is in regards to not just the recording of the declarations of interest, but the publication or the access for the public to these documents. I wonder if you could share any information on that, because obviously one of the key risks, I guess, is that there is a perception of irregularity, and it should be an easy job for the public just to go, no, nothing there, and that's it. It puts it to bed straight away. So is it going to be publicized on our website, etc., or is it the local authorities? I'd be interested in knowing that. On the risk management, obviously we haven't got the risk register with us today, but just quickly, has the new flood maps for the Welsh Government been included in that? Because I think that poses a significant risk to 1 or 2 of the projects.
Yeah, it's introduced. We'll deal, Rich, I'll bring you in on the first part with the DOIs in a second, but just to cover off the 10-15, yes, Chair, it is. Again, to the relevant projects, that's been cascaded down. And I know that there's lots of things being discussed regionally, and Councillor Rob Stewart has taken that forward on behalf of the region, but across Wales as well, with the WLGA and Welsh Government and other organisations. So yes, it's clearly red risk on our portfolio risk register and the relevant projects. And there is debate as to which map, because there's maps without flood defences and there's maps with flood defences, but it does affect a few of our projects, yes, Chair. So we are closely monitoring that. But the advice we've given to all of our projects that are affected by it is proceed as planned. Still go forward with the planning applications and whatever else that they're doing, because some things could change which aren't in our control today. So if we stop and then find out that we can proceed, we would have wasted months of effort then. So that's the line that we've taken. Okay,
yeah. Richard, do you want to come in?
Yes, in respect to the publication of the DOIs, it's something that we're looking at to do. I think some of what we've done discussions with is to whose declarations is going on. For example, is it the members and officers, or is it just going to remain as high level as the members? And then in January, I'm meeting. They're looking to do. We'll be doing an update on the website in January, so that's when we'll be accommodating that, because there's other legal stuff that needs to be added onto the website as well. So that's what we're looking to do. So they will be going on, and I'll let you know as to what level and who what boards are going on. But there's something that will be happening.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear the other members' thoughts on this, but from my personal opinion, one of the recommendations I could give back to you would be, considering why this came about, it would probably be in the best interest of the Swansea Bay City deal that officers are included just for the sake of clarity. Not that we suspect anything, but I think it just tied that over quite nicely, and there'll be no kind of issues there. So I don't know if any members wish to kind of support that recommendation going to the JC, but I think that's important. I'll bring in Councillor Morgan first, though.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate we haven't got the risk register in front of us today, but as a general point, I think it's fair to say, when we see the risk register, say at the next meeting, and we look at it, when we see it at a following meeting, things might have changed. So all I'd ask is, can we incorporate into any risk register that comes to us a sort of exception report, so that if risks are dropped or changed, rather than members having to scroll through them all and try and work out like a cat and mouse game, what's changed. If I can ask for simplicity for the members of this committee, if we are clearly drawn to the risks that have changed and why they've changed, or if they've been removed, why they've been removed. Thank you, Chair.
And Councillor, again, just to give you reassurance with that, that is in the template that exists. It may have been tweaked since the last one that you saw, because it was quite a while ago that you saw the last one, but it basically shows you the direction of travel. Is a risk increasing? Is it decreasing? And then obviously with the mitigations and the explanation, that should cover why has it gone up or down. And again, if anything's removed, we will make sure that that's clarified. And the focus more is on the red or rising amber risks that we'll focus on. We do that at the governance boards. And just to cover off, we also have COVID impact assessment. And again, we'll do a similar exercise with that to help clarify the change of direction if there's any. And Phil is also leading an additional risk assessment, which is around construction costs. So rising construction costs, availability of resources. The difficulty we have at a portfolio level is that every project is at different stages. So some know exactly where they are with the costs, others won't know until they've gone to procurement. So we will continue to monitor that as a specific thing, and that was action from our programme board 2 months ago. So just for a holistic kind of view on that, but Councillor, we will provide you with what you've asked for, and if it's still not exactly what you want, please let us know and we can adjust accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Morgan. And on the point I raised regarding publication, does anyone else want to raise anything on that, or are we happy to proceed? Can't see any indications on that. There we are. Okay, so if we move on to the next item, it is agenda item number 7. So obviously this is for information only, and it's the governance board meeting protocol. So do you want to go through that very quickly?
Yeah, Chair, thanks, Chair. It's with me again. Even though it's stated for information, this is a living document. So any feedback today or any feedback following from today's meeting or any future meetings, please let us know as a PMO and we can incorporate any changes that are required. So it's an operational document, in other words. So basically, this was requested from our senior responsible owner, so Wendy Walters. She asked us to prepare a paper which provides guidance, particularly around the preparation, coordination and the delivery of our governance boards. So the arrangements included in the document are things like notice of meetings, time, commitment from stakeholders, meeting etiquette, agenda setting, sharing of documents, etc. So as you said, this is in effect owned by the PMO in terms of a kind of change control for a document, but we are sharing it with all of our governance boards, including yourselves. That's why it's here today. We welcome any feedback, and we have been working with a team in Neath for Talbot to document and articulate some of the key requirements for Joint Scrutiny Committee. And if there's any further, then we would welcome that dialogue and feedback.
Yeah, personally, as obviously the chair of this committee, I think if we can look at 5.1, so it's page 26, the agenda setting element. So obviously initially you've got in there as the PMO in conjunction with DSU and the relevant chairs would coordinate the drafting of agendas for the Joint Scrutiny Committee. The wording of that, I think we need clarity, because that kind of gives the impression that the PMO is going to be largely set in our agendas, which I think as a committee we would push back on, to be honest, because that's not the way that scrutiny works across any of the authorities. It is the Scrutiny Committee that sets the agenda, and then through collaboration with yourselves and the relevant officers on the drawing of reports and information, then we can get a working order. So I'm not sure whether that was the intention of that.
It was the intention, Chair, but I can understand how it's interpreted. If you read the second sentence on 5.1, one of them is in conjunction with, in other words, is we work with, and then the second part is that we will coordinate. So we coordinate them for Programme Board and we coordinate them with Economic Strategy Board, so the chair of that. But the first two, we are in your hands, if you like, of the joint working to get them set up. But if you would like a clarity on the first sentence, we can provide.
I think that would be helpful. Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Chair, I can see Mike nodding. Mike, do you want to provide any words for that, or Alison provide a couple of words just to make sure it covers off
Yes.
Like it worded, is that okay?
If that's all right, Mr. Chair, yes, we can provide a wording that I trust will suit the scrutiny committee and can be fed back to you then, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mark.
That's great, thank you.
Sir, forgive me, Mr. Chair, that there may also have been a point at paragraph 3 as well, which was the time commitment, I believe. And the quorum for the
yes,
committee.
that's right. So quorum 3.8 again on 26. Obviously, it's got 8 members down at the moment. I know we're in discussions, and I'm sure members of this committee are as frustrated as I am that we still haven't quite got there. I'm hopeful that you are working with your colleagues in Pembrokeshire to sign off that element, but as you say, it's a living document, so I would assume that once that changes to 6, then that document would be changed to reflect the new working arrangements.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Jones, I saw your hand was raised.
Oh, it was only actually to that point 3.8, you know, to make sure that it's minuted, really.
That's good. Okay, does anyone else have any other items that they want to raise on this matter? I can't see any. So if we can move on then to agenda item number 8, which is the Gateway Review Action Plan. And once again, I think it is you, John.
Yeah, yes, thanks, Chair. You should have 3 documents in the pack that you had. The first one is a cover note, but just for me to reiterate, you will have heard about the Gateway Review, you would have had documentation previously, but just to refresh everyone's memories. So we had a Gateway Review. This is a strategic review, external team coming in, meeting with all of our stakeholders, about 24 of them, I think there was in this case. And it's a 3-day review. This isn't an audit. This is about forward looking and looking at things to unblock and recommendations to help improve and move things as swiftly as we can into delivery. The review took place in July. We had an amber green rating, so what they call a delivery confidence assessment. I've had it on good authority that at a portfolio level, we are very unlikely to get anything higher than an amber green. So in other words, that is probably the highest until you've virtually completed the portfolio. So in terms of direction of travel, we're going in the right way, lots of positive comments in there. But in amongst the positive comments, there are things that we need to reflect on and improve on. And we have, in total, there's 11 recommendations, 4 of them with a part A and part B, so there's 5 in total are key recommendations. And then the second document you have are advisory recommendations. So these aren't critical, but they could be implemented to help improve things. So we're taking them all as a priority. So we're looking at all 11. In terms of the report that you've had, I will go through each one. And again, if the chair, if you want to stop me or ask questions at the end, I'll just give you an indication of where we are today with each of the recommendations. So
yeah, just give a brief update on each.
Yeah, I won't go into labour the points, but Gate 001A and B, the first part is about updating our comms plan. So we now have, as Rich said earlier on, we now have a marketing comms officer re-employed into that post. So Heidi, who I'd like to bring to this meeting at some point, she's in post and she is looking at reviewing and updating all the things around the comms plan. We've put a target of November, which was quite ambitious, but we're pretty much there. It will go through governance probably in the new year. So again, that will come through to joint scrutiny as well. And then the second part of it was around dashboard information. And I think this is, again, what you're seeking as a board, and that's making sure that you see tangible numbers and hopefully qualitative information behind that to show the movement of delivery. So what Phil has been doing with the team and the wider team is trialing project portfolio program management tooling. So that's basically software. We're in the process of procuring that. We've done lots of different trials and assessments and getting quotes, etc. So hopefully within the next month or so, we will have that software in place and we can start utilising it and then providing dashboard information to all of our governance boards through that process. So that's 1A and B. Number 2 is around outcomes and benefits. And again, Chair, I don't think I need to labour that. I've already covered that off quite a bit, and Phil and Rich have as well. So we are continuing to make sure that things are realistic. We are asking projects and programmes to make sure that they're reviewing and live monitoring of outputs and outcomes. If things change, we have a change process that we can go through to make sure that those are highlighted and any risks associated with them are mitigated as soon as we can. The Gateway 3 recommendations around terms of reference. Simply put, this can't happen until all the stuff around corporate joint committees are in place. So we're not going to update any terms of reference with the exception of the Chorusy for Joint Scrutiny Committee. So that will be put on hold until we know where we are and how City Deal governance will work with the wider corporate joint committees. So we've set a target date of February 22. It probably will be a bit later, but we'll keep on monitoring and engaging with the chief execs for the 4 local authorities on that. And then the 4th and the final of the key recommendations is about support to all of the projects and programmes. And what we're trying to achieve there is making sure that everything is fit for purpose and that we are engaging and that we are doing things in the right way and robustly. So we've done things like a skills audit on the project and programme managers. So Phil has undertaken that with a team, but because we've recruited so many new people in recent months, and we will continue to recruit, we'll probably refresh that before we put it to any of our governance boards. So that is in process. We're also looking at targeted support with particular projects and programmes, engagement with our leads and SROs. We've recently done a survey, and again, when the results are collated and put together, we will put that through governance, and you will receive that as a matter of course as well. So you can see what the people involved in the project leads, what they would like to see, and included in that is the dashboard information in that P3M tooling that I mentioned earlier. And if there's anything that we are duplicating or we're not streamlining, we're asking that for that feedback as well. So again, the offer is there for this board. If anything comes through that process in terms of any feedback that can improve on what we're providing, we've had some today already, but we can continue that dialogue. So Chair, that's the first document. The second one is about the advisory notes. So as I said, we're treating these as important as the primary recommendations. There's 5 to 10, so I'll just rattle through those if that's all right, Chair. Or Chair, would you rather me pause, because there's a lot of information in the first report? Would anybody like to?
Does anyone want to raise any issues?
On the
No, carry on, John.
Okay, so with the second report, as I said, we're going to treat these as equal in priority. So Programme Board Joint Committee to use what we have as a portfolio business case to maintain alignment with strategic priorities. So we're currently in the process now of updating our portfolio business case. So Ian Williams and the team is already starting to engage with various stakeholders on that. We also are utilising the chief execs and the leaders around discussions moving forward in terms of the governance boards, how we fit any new strategies coming forward from the region. I give an example of the economic development plan. That's one which will be out probably by January, so we need to encompass that within it. But again, it's making sure that we go through our governance boards and make sure that we update our business case. Everybody has time to consult on it and then update and reprioritise if needed. Gate 6 is around protocols in relation to communications. And as I said before, communications is one of the most important yet complex things. So we have now had feedback through the survey from the senior responsible officers and the programme project leads on comms. So we're going to encompass that in our work plan going forward. And again, we welcome feedback from any of our boards. We have lots from yourselves and from Economic Strategy Board and from Programme Board to, again, tweak and improve. And we also have regular engagements now with Welsh and UK government. So we're now having monthly meetings with them, and they request information. They request information in particular formats. So we're working with them to give them what information they need from ministers and officers, etc. Gate 7 is about Joint Committee and Programme Board having the flexibility to via across projects and programmes. Due to the nature of the Swansea Bay City deal, that is limited, right? So the allocation of funds per project is outlined with the JCA. They are allocated through the funding agreements that Rich referred to earlier on. So there is limited flexibility in how we are set up, but we will continue to monitor that. And if things again change, we have a change request process, and we can accommodate any changes or highlight them and escalate them as appropriate. Number 8 is about streamlining the risk register. That was again similar to what we had in our audit requirements. So again, we will continue to evolve that. It has been updated. Coming back to Councillor Morgan's request, we'll make sure that that is in there in terms of direction of travel. So we believe that that is complete or near complete. Number 9 is about attracting private sector investment. And again, without labouring that point and going over what we've already discussed, we are in the process of monitoring it. We have mitigations that are in place or planned to be in place. So we'll continue to move forward on those. And then the final one is about the networking between the PMO and the regional offices. So as we grow, because we are starting to grow, you met Una today, the HAPS project lead, and there are others. Sam has been recruited recently for skills and talent program, and we've got Tony recruited for campuses and wider teams. We will continue to work with them. We now have monthly meetings in place with a wider PMO, which includes all of those team members. And we're also looking at formalising and cascading down the senior responsible owner and the roles and responsibilities of that to all programmes and projects across the portfolio. So, Chair, in summary, a very quick summary of all of those 11 key recommendations. That's where we currently are.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. I guess one of the interesting ones I have is on the linkage between these bodies and the future governance regional structures. And I guess it's maybe something for the future for this committee to have a look at, and maybe bring in chief executives, or ask for papers from them or something in terms of the future direction, because I think it's all in all of our interest that we have an indication on that, to be honest. Okay, does anyone else have any questions or any points they want to raise on any of these matters? No, thank you very much, Jonathan. The last point is agenda item number 9. This is just a forward work programme. Unless anyone has anything they want to add or change, we can look at other suggestions outside the meeting if anyone wants to wait. Jonathan.
Chair, it's probably worth noting, in the next joint committee, we will have the joint committee work programme. And again, we'll share that with you to make sure that we're aligned. And this comes back to that section 5.3, the setting of agendas, where you can see the joint committee forward work plan to align it to your work plan, and hopefully get things at a good time to then scrutinise accordingly.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Would also be helpful in terms of meetings, because my understanding is that since May, a majority of the joint committee meetings have been cancelled, 4 of the last 7. So obviously, if they've got a work programme, it'd be quite interesting to see how they're getting through that with all the cancellation of the meetings as well. So thank you very much for that, John. Does any members have anything to raise on this? Okay, can't see anything. So thank you all for attending the meeting today. There's no urgent items that have been brought to my attention, so I have the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.